How's it going, everybody? In this video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our last variation for option B, which is going to be probably the most common way to implement option B, and that's to disable the route target filter capability on iOS and XR. So the idea is we're going to go actually turn off the route reflector config on all the routers, get us back to a base config. So we're going to roll that back. And then we're going to do the no BGP route target filter and the retain route target filter all commands on XR so that we can demonstrate how that comes into play and get all that squared away. So let's go ahead and dive into that and take a look at what's necessary. So if we were to do a show run section BGP and we were to look underneath VPN v4 and VPN v6, we're going to see that the route reflector client has been associated to both. So I'm going to go up to global config, router BGP1, address family VPN v4 unicast, neighbor of 1.0.0.101, route reflector client. I'm going to come in here and type in no route reflector client. So that'll break the config. And then I'll hit the up arrow a couple times and I'll go back to VPN v6. And then same command here. And that will break the connectivity that we have in play. So if I go back to route reflector 1, for example, and I see show BGP VPN v4 unicast all, I'm only going to see traffic coming in from XR11 once the peerings go down and traffic is lost. So for the moment we have the routes, but after some time this traffic will eventually go away. So if we look at router 5, do show BGP VPN v4 unicast all, we're receiving prefixes in, but let's just double check the rest of the config. So it's all there. Now there's no VRFs configured, so do show BGP VPN v4 unicast all. So we're receiving routes from CSR6, and that's who we're receiving traffic from. If we go back to router 1, or route reflector 1, I'm waiting for this stuff to go away, because this stuff is being propagated. So if we go to CSR6 and do the same thing, router BGP 2, address family, VPN v4 unicast, no neighbor 2.0.0.20 route reflector client. We'll do that, and then CSR5 is going to squawk about that. So we're going to go back to 6, hit the up arrow, and go to VPN v6, and do the same thing. So by doing that, we'll lose those prefixes. If we go back to router 1, we're going to lose all that connectivity, which is what we want to have. So I'm going to go back and configure this now on XR11. So I'll go to global config, router BGP1, neighbor of 1.0.0.101, address family VPN v4 unicast, and no route reflector client. Same thing for VPN v6, no route reflector client, commit that config, do the same thing on 12. Go to global config, router BGP2, neighbor of 2.0.0.20, address family VPN v4 unicast, and no route reflector client. Same thing for v6, and commit. Now that we have that in play, if we go back to router 1, we're not going to have any routes from CSR5 or XR11. So we're in a good spot now. Now we're going to go back to 5, and what we're going to go do is underneath address family VPN v4 unicast, we're going to type in the command no BGP route target no, or is it IPv4? No BGP. There must be an address IPv4 thing. So address family IPv4 unicast, no BGP what was it? Or no BGP would be at the global command. It's a BGP command. BGP route. No. Address family VPN v4 unicast. No BGP. Oh, default. That's right. Route target. That's my mistake. Route target filter. So we're going to type that command in. And this will actually require basically a clearing, or you have to manually clear the BGP table. It doesn't automatically do it for you. And we're going to do the same thing for VPN v6. So now we're going to type in do clear IPBGP star soft. And then that will trigger the update. Other than that, if you don't type those commands in, it won't actually take effect. So we'll do the same thing over here. Type in address family VPN v4 unicast and no BGP default route target filter for v6. And do clear IPBGP star soft. So that should start going ahead and triggering the updates to go in. 5 should start receiving a bunch of prefixes. And if I come back over here now, that stuff should be learned. So do show BGP VPN v4 unicast all. And I'm learning stuff from my local autonomous system, but not from CSR6. Do show BGP VPN v4 unicast all. Well, this one's learning traffic. Oh, it was just taking longer than I wasn't giving it enough time. So now if we go back to router 1 and hit the up arrow, now we're learning traffic. Now, let's do it on XR11. Sometimes I can be a little impatient and not want to wait around for it and thinking it's going to happen like that. Patience is a virtue. So on 11, we're going to go underneath the address family itself. So address family VPN v4 unicast, and we're typing retain route target all. But we could specify a route policy as well, but this command, it's a kind of a catch-all. And we're going to do that. So show config, we can go ahead and commit it, and that should trigger what we need to trigger. So go to 12 and exit out and type in these commands right there. So we're going to go ahead and commit that. We're going to go back to route reflector 1, hit the up arrow, and so now what should end up happening is we're going to start learning routes in from, oh, you know what, I forgot about that, XR11 config, where I did the command where we went and preferred, because we look at route reflector 1, we can see the local preference is 200. I forgot about that. So we have to go type in neighbor of 12.11.12.12, address family VPN v4 unicast, and the route dash policy in this particular case is just going to be eBGP peer and in, and commit that. And then go back to route reflector 1, and after a moment or so we should see everything in there, which is what we want to see. So this is a great opportunity to validate the operations now. So we go over to, say, router 21 and we do a show IP route, we can see that the prefixes have been learned and are operational. So we should be able to do a trace route to 10.3.27.27, sourcing from loopback 3 numerically, and we should be able to get across the wire all day long. So here we have a problem. So let's see what the actual problem is. Maybe we have a recursion issue. So let's take a look at this and see what the actual problem is. So from a control plane perspective, everything's where it needs to be. If we look at CSR1, show BGP VPN v4 unicast all, we have a bunch of prefixes in the routing table. and 27 looks good. So we're preferring router 5. And let's just make sure that router 5 do show BGP, VPN, v4, unicast, all. Make sure everything's coming across the way that it should be, which it is, which is good. So now if I was to go look at everything else should be squared away. So let's double check on 27 to make sure that he's got everything that he needs. So show IP route, and he doesn't have the routes. So we need to go figure out why he doesn't have the routes. So on CSR 6, for example, let's look at him. Do show BGP, VPN, v4, unicast, all. We've got stuff coming across, which is what we want. If I go to route reflector 2, log in, show BGP, VPN, v4, unicast, and I have learned 20. I've learned 21 in from 6, which is good. And then CSR 8, show BGP, VPN, v4, unicast, all. I should be learning 21, and I'm not. So let's look at I'm not learning 27 or 21 in or 24. So let's show run VRF C3 and see what's missing. And the problem is with C3 is I'm not actually importing the right values. So let's type in VRF C3, VRF definition C3, and we're going to type in route target import. I'm going to do 103 colon, I believe it was 103 colon 1. Show run VRF C3, 103 colon 1, 103 colon 2. Colon 1 and 2. And let's just make sure that that's happening on XR16 as well. Show run VRF C3. 103, yep, we're doing that. So now if we go back to CSR8, do show BGP, VPN, v4, unicast, all. We are now receiving those prefixes. If we go back to 27, now we have all the routes in the routing table. Go back to 19, or sorry, in this case you're 21. Do the trace and it should be end-to-end. So again, those are things where you'd want to just make sure it's ties back to the aspect of making sure you understand the order of operations. You know, what is necessary in order to get all this stuff to work. If that works, then you're in really good shape. If it doesn't work, then that's going to be a problem. And in this case here, it's relatively simple to troubleshoot these scenarios because of the fact that you know the steps. Because what's still happening is here on the connections, we still have here on these guys, you still have the route target values being imported. You still have the VPN v4 peering set up here and the route reflection going on here. On here, we're just turning off, we're disabling the route target filter here. That's all we're doing. We're not doing anything fancy. And then we've cleared that on both sides, so we have the propagation. So everything's working the way that it should be and needs to be operational. So this is one of those situations where once you have the config in play, remember just to clear BGP on the CSR boxes in order to trigger the update, and you'll be in good shape there. But you also need to make sure to do the route target imports here in order to allow the traffic to come across. So now that we have this all in play, the next thing that I want to go do is I actually want to go through and just do basic reachability tests. So let's go to 19. And we're going to do a show IP route. And we're going to do a show IPv6 route. Make sure we're learning all the BGP routes, which we are. So I'm just going to do trace route to 10.1.25.25 sourcing from loopback 1 numerically. Can we get all the way across? Which we can. And then we're going to do 28. We'll do 28. will get all the way across. Now the reason why I'm doing this is to test the connectivity. So on 20, we're going to do the same thing. Show IP route. We're going to do a trace route to 10.2.26.26, sourcing from loopback 2 numerically. Okay, here we have a problem. So in this case here, my first instinct is to go look on CSR2, show run VRF C2, and look at the config. So we're exporting 1::1.0.0.2:2. So that means we need to go over to CSR8, show run VRF C2, and make sure we're importing that, which we're not. So VRF definition C2 and route target import, and we're going to do 1.0.0.2:2. So now if I go to 26, for example, and show IP route, now I've got 23 coming in. And if I don't have 20 though coming across. So I need to go to CSR8, hit the up arrow, and just do a 1.0.0.0:2. Go back to 26, hit the up arrow. Now I'm receiving both routes in. If I go back to 20, now I get across. So if I do the trace route, I'm good to go there. So let's look at 21 and do a trace route there. So we've done 27. Let's now do 30. So we'll do a 30 trace. So 30 comes across all day long. So let's go to 22 now and test its connectivity. We'll do a show IP route, and we'll trace route to 10.1.25.25, sourcing from loopback 1 numerically. We should get all the way across. And then we'll do, I did 25, let's do 28 now. 28 should work without a hitch. So that's exactly how I want it to look. Let's go to 23. So show IP route, trace route to 10.2.26.26, sourcing from loopback 2 numerically. I should be able to get across all day long, which I can. And then we're going to do 28. Okay, we have a problem initially with 28, so that means we need to look at XR16. So let's look at XR16. XR16 for CSR for C2, and this is attached to CSR2. So let's look at where we are exporting that guy. So I am doing a trace from. Oh, so I'm sorry. That's 20. Yeah, that's 23. Why is that not propagating? Even though the control plane's working. 26. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing 20. That's my mistake. 29. Control Shift 6. That's going to be 29. That's my mistake. 29, not 28. That's 28's customer 1. 29. There we go. So 29 is good to go now. And we're going to go hit the, we're going to go down to CS router 24 now. And we're going to do a show IP route. And we're going to do a trace route to 10.3.27.27, sourcing from loopback 3 numerically. We should be able to get across without a hitch, and we can. And then lastly, it'll be 30. That we can get across. Now, what all that tracing just proved to us is that, one, we know that the inter-AS connectivity for all 3 customers is good. Number 2, that validates that the control plane's working as well as the data plane. If the data plane was broken, it would have been obvious through the trace routes. So these are things that you'll need to think about when you're doing validation tests. If I can't ping or trace route when I'm doing something, unless it doesn't make sense to do a trace route. For example, If you're doing an IPsec VPN with a crypto map, and there's just the crypto map, there's no GRE tunnel involved with it, trace routes aren't going to work. So you'll have to take that into consideration. But in this case here, there is IP addressing that we can use, and we are forwarding that traffic as we need to. So it's working in that manner. So that's good for us. That's pretty much everything here. We've done all the trace routes we can. The next step for us to go do would be to jump into option C, and I'll walk you through the option C logic and how all that comes into play. It requires another level of config above and beyond what we've already talked about. We're going to have to rip out the configs that we did for option B to a degree. We're going to do some things. Some things stay in place for option B, or from option B into option C, like the VRF imports, and then doing the ASBR reception of routes. A lot of that type of stuff stays in play. So option B stuff carries over. I'd say option C is probably the second most option C is probably the most difficult, just doing 2 autonomous systems. I mean, you can do multiple. You can do 10 autonomous systems as long as you've done the proper propagation. You could string across and have a label switch path that's 20 labels deep if you really wanted to. The point being, though, is when you start getting into that level of complexity, you really need to know what's going on. So we'll talk about how that comes into play with option C when we get to option C, but that's basically where we're at. Until next time, guys, thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with me, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.